Hello and welcome to the Tolkien Society this Saturday, December 21st, 2019. It's our monthly meeting on the third Saturday of each month. And I'm the primary host and founder of the Tolkien Society. And joining us tonight we have,
Chris
today,
Stein,
afternoon,
Dues Bay member
From
the South Farthing.
That's right.
I'm Richard Baldwin. I wandered in off the street and they let me stay.
I'm Corey.
Yeah, Richard, we're going to talk about that. No.
We're in arrears. We're finally catching up to that point.
Well, I guess I'll be leaving then.
I feel like I don't have any reason to give a long story about where I come from here.
You're a frequent member.
I'm a frequent member. I'm a non
Frequent flyer.
Member. You know, I love free stuff. That's my.
We are here for all and sundry.
So, anyways,
Except for me.
Yeah, and I'm Brian Hughesland, Secretary of the Smile. Sometimes I smile as well.
You smile when you're writing the
Well, if you want to go ahead and cover last month's notes while I tweet and Facebook and all that to
Sure.
get the word out.
Okay, thanks, Hawk.
And
Chris
Discord.
And Richard and Corey.
tweet.
Okay,
Tweedly tweet.
so the notes from the Inland Northwest Smile of the Tolkien Society. Not quite. I think I got that wrong. Should be it's the Tolkien Society of the Inland Northwest. Anyway, so the 16th of November 2019 was our last meeting, and we had in person Noah, Chris, Brian, and Hawk, and Sam and John attended remotely. Number one, October notes were read by Brian to the Smile, including votes for the theme of next year's Tolkien Moot 16 XVI, which will be on the topic, or the outcome of the vote was Second Age Numenor. Therefore, Hawk commented on the winning proposal. 3 campaigns will therefore be spread out over at least
3 to 5 years.
5 years for the next Tolkien Moots, and that will include 3 parts of that long campaign, or mega campaign. Rise of Numenor, followed by the Glory of Numenor, and then the Fall of Numenor. Also, there was a reference in our last meeting to the Wagner Society and the helpful infographics that Marty, and I didn't see his.
That's all right.
I lost his last name.
Marty's
But
fine.
There's a link to Marty's infographics if somebody's interested in following up on that.
May I ask what are
Yeah.
infographics?
So basically, it's just a kind of graphical way of representing the plot of a story. And so what he was doing was he was showing how Wagner, as a German composer, had in taking the ring cycle, which has to do with rings and dwarves and dragons.
Right.
And he was
Oh,
kind of
my.
showing the showing the link-ups. That there are interesting link-ups with Middle Earth, and so we had kind of mutual interests. So he did a great job kind of walking us through, because none of us were really super familiar with the ring. We'd heard of it, but didn't know as much about that. So that's kind of interesting. For those of you who want to kind of click on that and have a look at...
Makes me think of flannel graph or something like.
Yeah, it was a map, but
Yeah.
with some of the storyline and
map.
stuff mixed in. Yep.
And then this one, I'm afraid I got it a bit wrong, so we'll have to amend that in the notes. But basically, Hawk, you made a comment about 2 different things: Neverwinter Nights and then The Tempest.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please, just for the sake of clarity, differentiate then about these 2? These are basically part of RPG research.
Right. We're
And
doing
the
a
link-up had to do, I think, with the fact that we were talking about stories. And
right. We have a software development division, and we're creating a new video game, basically. And for our testing, the storyline we're following, just so we're kind of all on the same page, we didn't have to create it all from scratch, is Shakespeare's The Tempest, which has some historical context as well. And then because it's an island, it was small enough and that we could, for a small project, it was helpful. And so we've been using software called Twine from twinery.org, which is open source branching narrative software
great.
to help you organize your storyline as you branch it out and bring it back and figure out different endings. Our last meeting last week, we decided we're going to come up with 9 different endings. So 6 to 9 endings. So that because the last choice they get 3 options, and then depending upon everything they did previously in the story, there's 3 outcomes from each of that last 3 choices. So if they were good guys throughout the adventure and they make one of these 3 choices, that impacts how the non-player characters in the story react to them with each one. If they were in the middle, different reaction. If they were evil, different reaction. They still get to make these 3 choices, but all the choices they made before are going to have an impact on how each one of those turns out. So that works out to 9 outcomes, right? And some of them might be kind of similar, but because of what they did in the past, it'll have... And so that's still actually a fairly simplified option, but we didn't want to get completely crazy for a prototype. So that's why we're bringing that
I
up.
always think
We would love to do it in Middle Earth and everything, but A, there's licensing. B, it'd be much more complicated because I wouldn't be able to avoid going down a lot of rabbit holes. And so The Tempest was a nice, small, short story.
Neverwinter Nights.
So Neverwinter Nights is a video game that was published in 2002.
Right, D&D, right.
Yeah, it uses D&D as the underlying system. But what's cool about it is it includes a Dungeon Master's client and the Aurora toolset so you can make your own adventures. There are entire persistent worlds of Greyhawk and other worlds out there that have been running for years now that you can log into and play through. All those modules I have on the shelves there from first edition, they've been turned into persistent adventure worlds and such. So you can adventure for years. That's the beauty of when a company, and one of the few companies that provided these kinds of tool sets. So we're able to use that tool set to create a prototype using Neverwinter Nights so we're going to create a Neverwinter Nights version of the island from Prospero's island from The Tempest. And that's kind of to get all of our development team kind of familiar with a lot of the concepts. Then we're going to go create our own software, tool set, etc. But I wanted them to get familiar with all the ideas using Neverwinter Nights as a prototype. So that's what's a lot of fun about it.
There's something that sort of relates. There's this website called World Anvil, based in the UK.
Okay.
And their intent is to provide a web space where you can
develop a world and put down all the information that one needs to run a game in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
Okay.
So, if I get this right...
Yeah, I mean, it's because I self-host all of that myself. I've got my own wikis and everything else, and it kind of provides that for people who don't have a technical background.
Okay.
So it's got some strengths and weaknesses, but it's, for people who are new to world building, it's a good starting point.
Well, I was kind of looking at it because I was trying to think of a way of hanging out in the world spaces that I'm writing about
Yeah.
when I'm not writing it.
And tying this back to Tolkien, if Tolkien had, let's say, all of Tolkien's stuff hadn't come out yet, fantasy, all that stuff hadn't really happened yet, but all these tools and world building of the modern day existed, I don't know that his works would have stood out as significantly in all the noise.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of noise out there now with the internet and everything.
Well, it kind of came out in a vacuum, didn't it?
And his niggling, well, it was first, so I mean, it brought together for the first time a lot of pieces that were here and there. He everything's derivative, but it was the first time it was all brought together that way. The one thing that's distinctive still to this day, though, that nobody else, as far as I know, has ever done, is world building starting with language first. That's the key differentiator with him. I don't know of anybody else who came from a linguistics and philology, back starting the story because of that, to explain the evolution of language. So that still would have made him distinctive from all the other world builders out there. And if he'd had access to all these world building tools, just imagine how much worse his niggling would have been.
He wouldn't have gotten anything done.
Yeah. Yeah, the internet would have completely overwhelmed him with all of the rabbit holes.
As it does.
Many.
He would have appreciated
Takes a lot of
tools
discipline.
because most of his starting point was a blank sheet of paper. So
No, but if he was born in a more modern society,
Yeah.
that wasn't so anathema to him and such. There's just a lot of things would have been different, but
Hard for us
yeah.
to know. And
I
it certainly was.
think that is part of our problem today, is that distraction.
Sure. Yep. All right. Did that answer what you were
I
asking?
think so.
sufficiently?
So let me just make sure I get this on. So Neverwinter's Nights. It's a video game.
Neverwinter Nights. Neverwinter's a city, and it's a night in Neverwinter.
So Neverwinter's one word. That's
yes,
helpful.
Neverwinter's one word, and then nights. It's nights in Neverwinter.
Is it?
As in K or
No, just it starts out with everybody has the plague.
okay.
So
Oh, that's a lovely way to start.
yes, and you're trying to find a cure as everybody in the city is
out your
dying,
dead.
as there are
Sorry.
bodies strewn throughout the city. You're trying to find.
Neverwinter Nights, and so you use the storyline of the Tempest
Yep.
as a way of practicing.
Story development with a development team. So we have 13 developers now. We're working up to 20 on the team, and so this is our practice.
And
We
we'll,
have everybody work together. Collaborative storytelling at a very complex degree.
and how will that end up being syncing with Neverwinter Nights?
So we are creating the storyline and all the pieces. Then we're going to go into Neverwinter Nights, use the Aurora toolset, create the map of the island, and everybody is shipwrecked on the island, and you play a player character.
I had no idea that it was so customizable.
Oh, 100%. It's amazing. And
Wow.
yeah, as I say, you can create. So each developer, we're going to give a square, a quadrant, or not a quadrant, a sector, because otherwise it'll only be 4. That whole quadrant thing bugs me. They're like, they're in the 6th quadrant of the galaxy. What? Quad! Sector. Anyway, you have all these sectors, so we'll have a grid map that lets you reference them and say, okay, Dario, you get sector H3. Tim, these are some of the actual developers' names. You get sector A2, etc. And then once they work on their sector and fill in the parts of their story, so you might have an encounter with one of the satyrs, or because we're going to add to it. It's going to obviously be embellished enough, but they're going to have where the different NPCs, the plotters of the storyline end up, right? Which is there's already been an infographic of the story, so we have some infographics of that, and so we'll be able to say, okay, you've got this part of it and this part, and we'll create the NPCs, we'll create scripts so that when you show up, they have certain things they say right out of Shakespeare, or maybe with a little modern language twist, we'll see. Anyway, so then you'll be able to take your D&D 3.5 Neverwinter Nights electronic character that you've created. You're shipwrecked, and you go through, and you each start up, separated and find each other. Then you find the others and wander around, and eventually end up with Prospero. And then, depending upon how you treated everybody else along the way, Prospero will do one of 3 things, depending upon the 3 choices you have. You can fight him.
Okay.
You can
So-
join him. You can leave him. Whatever.
What happened? Where did this polar bear come from? I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself with that reference.
Clearly, the polar bear is an immigrant.
I don't know the reference.
So if each developer is getting their own quadrant,
sector.
sector, then
6th quadrant.
then it's going to look a lot like Genesis,
It's gonna kill me.
Meaning.
Star Trek 3.
Where they're all on a
Kind of, right?
They all survive on an
Well, they're going to have
They have
guidelines, so they're going to get it. They're going to. We're using UML.
Uh-huh.
They got the interactive fiction
Yep.
storyline,
Okay.
and then the UML is the unified model language that says, "Here's your block.
Correct.
Here are the attributes we want you to fill in.
Right.
Don't
So-
get too carried away.
Yeah, the
To help
leads.
keep them from niggling.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So
I'm gonna keep
you're
going back to
using
Tolkien.
you're using 3.5, but you're
The
using
video game uses 3.5. We don't have control over it.
Right, but the D20 system
Yeah,
to
underneath.
generate character, but you're setting it. This video game setting is going to be in the Shakespeare's setting, which is public domain. So
Correct.
Excellent,
That's
thank
why,
you.
because it's public domain.
I
Very good.
know a streamer.
And it was a
would
good
probably
enough
be
story that
delighted
we could
to
do
look
it.
at that.
What's that?
I know a Twitch.tv streamer would probably like to look at that.
Feel free. We stream it all live every Thursday.
Didn't you ever see Lost, where they found that giant
I
polar
didn't
bear?
watch Lost.
You didn't
I
watch
watched
it?
like 1 or 2 episodes
That
of
was
Lost,
the-
and
that
I
was-
lost interest.
Well,
My interest got lost quickly into the parallel universes and such.
Oh, that can't be as bad as. I won't make any references to.
Yeah,
other
let's
things.
bring it into Tolkien.
Yes,
So
I will.
is the city of
take my own advice
Neverwinter
here.
in the tropics?
I tried to make
No,
a
we're not
joke, and I
doing
can't even
Neverwinter
pull
at
it
all.
off.
We're just using
All
the
right,
tools. The default adventure is in Neverwinter, but the game doesn't need it. You can put it
okay.
anywhere in the world. I could recreate 1917 Bolshevik Revolution if I wanted, except that you're all going to be medieval characters. That's the only
That's so
limitation.
specific.
Yes.
Anyways,
talk.
Yes.
So when can anybody get into this? I mean,
Every Thursday, 6 to 8 is when we are either doing Neverwhere Nights training or developer meeting.
but when would
Pacific time.
the average Joe be able to actually play this?
When we get it done, that's going to take what it's going to take. We're all volunteers. Everybody's not supposed to do, they're supposed to do between 5 to 10 hours a week when we get there. We're not there. We're still writing all the documentation. We first did the executive summary and business scope in August. Then we finished the technical scope around September, October. And now we've been working on the technical specifications documents and the narrative pieces. So we're getting down to the nitty gritty, but it's all still design level. Because I come from an enterprise background,
That's
where
right.
if you spend 89% of your time designing,
Do it
you only
right
spend
the
10%
first
of your
time.
time coding, and it gets
Yeah,
done much more
do it right
efficiently.
the first time, yeah.
Especially since we're using volunteers that we're offloading different snippets, it would be a nightmare to say, yeah, just go ahead and start coding, we'll make it come together, which is what a lot of open source and other groups do. This will be open source. We can't make the Neverwhere Nights part open source. So phase 1 is Neverwhere Nights. Phase 2 is we write all the source code for our own program, and that's all on GitHub for free.
Okay,
So, but the module will be available. People will be able to run on it, but it's many months away.
very good. Well, it's great. I like the link up with Shakespeare as well.
Yeah.
I might use it with my students.
And if it wasn't, yeah, that'd be great. And if it wasn't a licensing issue, we'd do a Tolkien in a heartbeat. But there's too much of a licensing issue.
That's
there.
great. I love it.
So,
Okay, back
moving
to
on.
Annette's.
Yes.
So, fifth point, how important is knowing about the first age? And this had to do with our last Tolkien moot, where it was the campaign was the fall of Gondolin and rescuing as many people as we could. So the question is, how important is knowing about the first age as background? First age is useful, but not necessary to understand the third age of Middle Earth. So it's just a really good discussion.
Tolkien hung up Lord of the Rings for 13 years because he thought it was so important.
Yeah, and as an author, we can see that that's where his passion was, because
Sure.
he'd say this is the ground from which all these plants grow.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think, just like we might find people getting interested in Tolkien because of the movies and then getting to the books, so people might get into the third age more easily and then to the first age.
Yep.
Last thoughts. Last thoughts on the fall of Gondolin. How Turgon handled isolationism versus globalism. What would be the wiser choice? To stay intact as a society, but to be sealed off from the rest of the world and its problems, or to be an advocate and help others and risk the dissolution of your own society?
Right. Well, and the way conquerors work is divide and conquer.
Exactly.
So, however, on the other end, if we look at today's modern situation, right now Europe and Asia has horrible economic. They're all on negative interest rates and such, right? That we have not yet, because of the recent isolation the last few years, we haven't caught the Asian contagion that we caught previous years when we were more directly linked. It's only a matter of time before that catches up to us, but it's been delayed considerably because of the recent isolationist approach
Not
the
if
last
you
3
read
years.
Adam Smith.
What's that?
Not if you read Adam Smith.
Which is relevant to
Wealth of Nations.
right?
Yeah.
Put it with your ego.
Meaning that
I have a lot of ego to fill it with.
sovereign unlinked
My cup overflowing.
nation is master of its own fate, was his general overarching, one
Right.
of his overarching.
Yeah, but it also then creates an island, and it
does.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have
It does.
resources, but it's fortunate that happened these last 3 years because Europe and Asia is in really bad shape, and we're not really experiencing it directly. But it's only a matter
Could be
of
worse.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, negative interest rates means you're putting money in the bank, and you have to pay them for the privilege to put your money in the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Instead
what
of
I
getting a
meant.
return on it, they take more money every month
Yeah.
from
How
your
does
account.
How does that even make sense?
Yeah, it's bad.
We also compared Rivendell as a mini Gondolin, that Elrond, who knew of
Right.
Gondolin, his father, of course, had been rescued as a boy
Yep.
from the Arendelle, but how Rivendell ends up becoming or needing to become.
And it
set up
did
shop
actually
in the world.
work, though.
Yeah.
Unlike Gondolin, it never got sacked.
And I think.
Even when all of the fall of Eriador
Yep.
and all of that,
Yep.
it actually held up.
Wouldn't that be probably because of the ring that he held? Because he had one of the 3 elven rings.
Yeah, I mean, but he also played a careful game. he wasn't doing forays out very often and such, you know. So
Unlike the impression that the movie
he didn't draw a lot of attention. What's that?
Unlike the impression that the
Yeah,
movie
if you ignore the movies and follow the books. But they did. He did send out with the Rangers
Gondolin-
and the elves a little bit, but
Right,
careful.
and Gondolin had a mole, literally.
Yes.
They
and,
had
and
someone
Rivendell
from
did not.
within.
Yeah.
Right, who ended up being able to lead the enemy there,
Yep.
whereas that's one benefit
Just like Troy.
Rivendell never had. So that's another benefit there. So we talked about the 3 rings, the Elven rings, and then talked about the relationship of Freya and Rhea, spirit and body, and the difference between elves and men, and elves coming back again versus men not only having one life. Okay, then we took turns reading the letters of Tolkien, and we were reading in letter 161 to Rainer Unwin, son of the publisher who then became publisher himself of Allen and Unwin Company. And this was in 1955, and this is just about the time when the Fellowship of the Ring is going to be published. And so we discussed in that letter about the map to accompany the Lord of the Rings. Tolkien had comments on that and things he wasn't quite happy about. Letter 162 was about Christopher's map, which was much better, and Tolkien recognized his son could do an even better job on that. Letter 163 was from Tolkien to W.H. Auden, his friend, and Tolkien wrote the trilogy as, quote, personal satisfaction. It's interesting that he did call it a trilogy there, even though really ultimately it's meant to be one story broken up into 6 parts.
Mm-hmm.
6 sectors. But anyway,
Quadrants?
Man, the last few weeks, everybody's been just pushing my pet peeve buttons. All my volunteers are giving me because I keep saying you don't need a 5th letter for the acronym for tabletop role-playing gaming. TRPG is sufficient to alleviate any confusion between different role-playing games. But there's been a recent trend of TTRPG, which is completely unnecessary. When you speak, it's you're adding an extra syllable when you're using an acronym.
as a tabletop or 2.
You're typing an extra key, so greater error rate. If you're on paper, you're using up more ink and trees. You're using up more bits of data, and you're wasting everybody's time. And yet, it's been this recent trend, and there's nothing to clarify some other TRPG confusion.
And not just
it's completely idiotic.
Not just in RPG land, but in other lands as well.
So some of my volunteers have been intentionally doing that, and Joe, my brother-in-law, is now extending it, trying to come up with TTRPG IEFs, like interactive experience. He's trying to see how long he can make it.
No.
I'm like,
I'll give into the dark side. I couldn't help myself. Oh, no.
Continue, please.
Doesn't that mean that Brian can slip into Star Trek?
We talked about interpretations, many different ones of Lord of the Rings, and a great quote by Tolkien about allegory. Quote, in a larger sense, it is, I suppose, impossible to write any story that is not allegorical in proportion as it comes to life, since each of us is an allegory, embodying in a particular tale and clothed in the garments of time and place, universal truth and everlasting life. End quote. We also discussed the roots of Lord of the Rings in Tolkien's imagination. He was talking about that a bit, and Hawk referred to the spiders from Tolkien's South African childhood. He was bitten, I think, by a spider.
Yeah.
So the question,
Even though he kind of denies it had much effect on him, the way childhood experiences like that.
Sure. It would give him at least some helpful ability to imagine a monstrous spider.
There was actually, I can't think of the author's name right now, but she said that essentially, was it C.S. Lewis that said something along the lines of, if you haven't had a childhood, you have enough material to write a novel. And so the idea is that your childhood has a huge part to play in the material that you produce as an author.
I would agree with that. Tolkien's friendship with Auden, and that's something we wanted to follow up with if anybody wants to find out how they knew each other and so forth. Tolkien's learning of languages, that he took pleasure especially in Welsh and Spanish. And Sam, who was online with us last month, pointed out that 1/3 of Spanish vocabulary comes from Arabic influence during the Moorish occupation of Spain. and therefore Spain sounds different than other Romance languages also descended from Latin, such as Italian and French.
English.
English is not descended from Latin.
Oh, it's a combination.
As loanwords from
French.
Latin. Well, okay.
Latin and German.
Indirectly, you would be right that through the French.
Yeah, but Latin influenced everything because we were at some point most of Western society was affected by Rome.
But the main point here would be that Tolkien's love of Spanish was unique in that though it's a Romance language, it's different than the other ones that descend from Latin.
Right, because the Moorish influence.
Exactly.
Occupation.
Yes. That's what I would say. So Atlantis myth, we talked about the Atlantis myth in Tolkien's Legendarium because of Numenor. And Sam mentioned that according to their own mytho-history, Basques descend from survivors of Atlantis. Basque is a language that has no related languages to it in the world. And then John's question about changes in Elvish being separated. Events bring differences between the elves and their languages. So Quenya, Sindarin, Sylvan, Elvish, just as we see in our own languages on Earth. Tolkien sought to mirror that, which goes back to Hawke's previous comment about building a world around the languages. It would perhaps be accurate to say that when he created the languages, then started to connect how these languages changed into other ones, then he would start to say what changed them and where did they spread out. And so that
I think Tolkien saw speech as a divine gift. Mm-hmm. That's the reason why he was so focused on the power of words and specifically naming things, as we see Adam in the beginning, naming the animals. There must be, he sees that as some sort of reflection of the word, the Trinity, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. So, it's probably, we're probably never going to see another guy quite like Tolkien because there's nobody out there doing exactly
so many worlds. Nowadays, everyone's in their silos, but I think Tolkien was good at bridging both pagan and Christian worlds, being able to find common ground and meaning and things like that. And I think words, you think of somebody who's different from Tolkien, and say Ursula K. Le Guin with her Earthsea trilogy, and how words mean something very important when you name things. And I think it does. It goes back to that.
Well, he's saying that words are not just merely grunts and whistles that we learned over millions of years, but is actually some sort of divine, I don't know what you want to call it, but a spark or whatever.
So I'm going to need to keep on going with the notes here. Did you need to make a comment?
Twitter suspended our account.
Any reason particularly?
Probably not active enough.
Okay.
I'm trying to see if I can get it unsuspended.
Well, anyway, let's continue on with the notes then. The Finnish epic Kalevala, he made reference to that, and how the ring is the link to the necromancer, the essential quest, as Tolkien said. So the ring really, in Tolkien's mind, was always linked up to that. And then the Kalevala points to follow up on for this Saturday. If we choose to, these are things we can follow up on. The Finnish epic Kalevala. We've, in the past several years ago, covered the tragic hero Kullervo, who is very much Turin Turambar, Tolkien's first age tragic hero, is somewhat based on him. But there are a lot of other stories in the Kalevala that we've not read, so that's something we could consider perhaps doing, just to get a better feel for some of the source material that inspired Tolkien, as well as other Norse mythology. Letter 164 would be what we would follow up with today, when we get to that. And then the question would be, what kind of friendship did Tolkien and W.H. Auden have? And Auden, of course, has written quite a few books in the past.
I tried to look him up the other day, and I don't know why. I knew that they were friends, but I couldn't, I don't know why I was having trouble trying to find, because I think he makes a comment about monsters existing in the real world or something along those lines, something about mythology, and I can't seem to find the quote because it's an interesting quote about how children, more or less, he says, children know that there are monsters out there. You don't have to tell them about monsters. I think it's the quote that's that's misquoted as Chesterton all the time. But
it's W.H. Auden.
It's Auden. That's actually the quote. But
Okay, well, I'll try to follow up on that. Look up Auden quote.
I don't remember.
If I could finish the notes, and then I welcome any other comments, please. I'm almost done.
Sorry.
So, 2 points left. This week, or this month, it'd be great if we could cover maybe some news articles from the Almond Hen newsletter. So I have that today that we can look at. And then updates on the Lord of the Rings Prime project, if there are any.
Yes.
And then, so great, Chris, if you can follow up on that. And then, so I'll be reading from this a little bit today, as well as, and hopefully wouldn't take it too much time just because it is role-playing as opposed to strict Tolkien, but as it relates to Middle-earth, wanted to make sure that's okay with everybody, but we kind of talk about the recent development this last month of Cubicle 7 no longer creating the One Ring material. So that's all kind of in stasis. And anyway, so I'd like to go to, if we can, but that's pretty much it. So those are the notes.
Hi there, Gustavo Jose. Welcome from Brazil. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So go ahead, Richard. What were you going to say?
Atlantis. There's a structure in the Sahara Desert called the Eye of Sahara, and it kind of fits Socrates' description pretty well, except for the part about being surrounded by water.
Plato's description.
Plato, yeah. The thing is, that area of the Sahara has risen out of the water over history.
Yeah.
So it's...
No, that's really interesting. Didn't the Aquaman movie actually capitalize on that?
I haven't seen it.
No, but okay, so I have, and they do actually go to the Sahara to find one of the things.
It's in the middle of the desert, yeah.
It's in Mali. Mm-hmm. But it's a circular structure, 1,000 miles wide, and it has mountains to the north, and it resembles the Eye of Ra in its general geography.
Probably a meteor.
No, actually, it's not. It's there's a freshwater spring in the middle of it, and it's an uplift of the geological structure, as opposed to being an impact crater.
Oh, okay, interesting. Thank you. No, that's good. Okay, any other comments before we start new things?
Chris?
Shall we start with new things for this month?
New things.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah.
Did you have any new things to mention, or would you like to maybe go ahead and follow up on
Anything about yesterday that you want to talk about?
Do we need a Chris prompter?
No. I'm not being very clear in my question. Was there anything this month you wanted to bring up that relates to Tolkien, or otherwise, if you could maybe tell us what you found about updates on Lord of the Rings Prime?
Yes, Lord of the Rings Prime. This looks like it's old news, but I don't think it's been mentioned. I think it was announced in September that they have confirmed that they are going back to New Zealand for filming.
Oh, okay.
But that they're not going to use any of the sets, and they're going to try to use other locations.
Okay.
Wasn't everything in the Second Age destroyed before the Third Age dawned? Or am I thinking the First Age?
Well, you're thinking that, but it's still true of the Second Age as well.
Still no official start date on production.
I think they're green-lighted for season 2 once they're done with season 1. So
season 2 is green-lighted.
So that's pretty promising.
There's 2 seasons green-lighted, and they haven't even...
Well, it does have an impact, because if the studio says, well, we'll wait and see how season 1 goes.
Yeah, you have to wrap it up more faster.
A lot of the unsatisfactory fiction stories are the result of the execs saying, I know we planned for 3 seasons, but you have 1.
Well, it might, I guess the optimistic take on it might be that they wanted to see how it all came together, and it looks like a pretty good product, and so they might say, wow,
this is really, I think it's going to do well. And then let's go ahead and you can start work on the second season. They usually take a hiatus, I think. So
Well, on an internet distributed thing, I think you have a better chance of getting a good product than you do from a television studio.
They've pulled a whole bunch of different people for the creative team. So
yeah, I think I saw that before.
Lindsay Weber, 10 Cloverfield Lane, Bruce Richmond, Game of Thrones, Gene Kelly, Boardwalk Empire, Jennifer Hutchinson, Breaking Bad, writer and executive producer Jason Cahill, The Sopranos, writer and executive producer Justin Doble, Stranger Things, consulting producer Brian Cogman, Game of Thrones,
I can't help it.
I know.
and Stephanie Folsom, Toy Story 4, and producer Ron Ames.
Breaking Bad, you could just see those poor hobbits holding on to their weeds.
Right.
Is that the one where Bilbo puts up a cigar manufactory in the Shire?
It seems like they have sucked up the creative talent of.
Yeah.
So
And that they're all from different places.
they
and
are from
different shows.
a bunch
So
of different shows.
it's not going to be all Game of Thronesy.
Right.
We can hope. Yeah.
Yeah, and that
We don't hear anybody
there's
from Game of
enough
Thrones in there,
people
do we?
from a bunch of different
From where?
places that seem to. That would seem to indicate
where was
that
one guy?
everybody believes this is going to be successful.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, I am giving you permission here. Just don't go on too long.
I don't want to.
I
don't want to do it
I
now.
want you. Okay. I was to say, speak briefly to maybe your concerns about how money can influence stories in a not so good way.
Well, I have always felt that it's interesting to note that things that do well are stuff that was a gamble to begin with, and usually not highly
Prized.
and stuff. It always amazes me the creativity that comes out when you're broke. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
That is a relevant topic to money.
We are not talking about that.
Star Wars reference?
I was in a thing I knew you were going with that.
No, but I find that the more money they throw at something, I don't know. It's just like when Lucas decided not to do good. I know I'm saying this, but when he made the trilogy and he had all these nice bells and whistles and all this kind of stuff because he had money he never had before.
Right.
And so he went all out and didn't have enough constructive criticism, and it became a
episode
mess.
1, 2, 3?
Yes, 1, 2, and 3. I didn't care for it because the problem is he had all the money in the world now, and he didn't. It didn't become a very what do you call it? Collaboration. It was more of a collaboration. His original series was more of a collaboration, but later on he became just my way or the highway, and we're going to use a bunch of money for special effects.
He might have been suffering a little bit from having yes men around.
Whereas they pulled Carpenters for the first one.
Right, exactly.
There's the Empire of Dreams. There's a great documentary on the first 3 movies, the original ones.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that. I didn't realize how on a budget they were. That first movie almost didn't make it.
And as a result, it's probably one of the better ones.
Yeah.
Right. I do believe it sometimes seems like it's the ones that aren't going to make it that
And I
do.
think I think that Disney suffers from that today,
Right.
where they didn't used to because they were on a shoestring budget. Warner Brothers, I was sitting watching with my daughter some of the old cartoons, and it was just the slapstick humor and music and other items that they got to evoke your emotion rather than what they do today.
Fireflies in it.
Well, I was
Firefly always had a horrible budget.
Yeah. Babylon 5 had a horrible budget.
Well, I was thinking of, there's, during the season, Christmas season, there are a lot of people that like to watch the movie with Bruce Willis, Die Hard.
Sure.
And it was considered at the time that they thought it was a non-starter because it actually meandered for like 10 years as a written project that never got done with, and then they put it together, and Die Hard is now, even to this day, the original is still considered a classic movie that people remember. That
So you think Bruce Willis's thing in the vents where he says, "Come to the Christmas party, it'll be fun." Do you think that was the pitch to the execs?
Okay, if I could.
Sorry to do this, but I forgot to eat and my blood sugar's crashing. So
Okay, that's fine.
get off camera.
So I'd like to move it on. Sorry, Chris, did you finish on the
Yes.
Lord of the Rings Prime?
That's
Thank
what,
you for that.
Those are the things that I have found. I haven't found anything substantially more.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything new that you want to bring up this month, Richard, related to Tolkien?
Nothing comes to mind.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anything?
I should search for more stuff during the month, but I never do. And
It's all good. Don't worry.
well, I kind of feel like sometimes I feel like I'm.
Well, you don't need to beat yourself up. I'm just asking because it's certainly fine if we don't all have comments.
We just want to make sure you have the chance. We don't want to bulldoze over you.
Oh, yeah.
You're not obligated to bring something.
Right.
Well, no, but sometimes I feel like I don't really pay attention to some of this stuff. Like, it's funny, I'll pay attention to stuff like Star Wars, but then I won't pay attention to stuff like Lord of the Rings stuff. It's
Two
like
references.
I'm trying not to. I really am not.
So, anybody heard any rumors of any more books?
Books for what? You mean Lord of the Rings? Yes.
Well, you know how Christopher Tolkien kept saying, "No, I'm not going to do any more."
Oh.
And then another one comes out. No, I'm done now. And then another one comes out.
No, I think he's finally done.
I think he's reached the bottom of that barrel.
I think he's
still alive, so until then.
I mean, there might be some items that he's putting together that may or may not be, fully publishable. But I would imagine he's still organizing stuff for the estate to carry on with.
Let's cover the three great tales.
Yeah.
And that's super helpful. Interestingly enough, there are letters that are not included in the letters of Tolkien, and
that are in the museum collection thing.
Yeah, and so one of them,
A lot of them.
there was I'll try to find this for next month, but there was actually a letter that sheds some light on Tom Bombadil that is not in the letters of Tolkien, but it's in Hammond and Skull. They were able to put it in one of their books. Anyway, so it's
which I do have.
yeah, I think it's annotated Lord of the Rings. Anyway, so
I always think it's funny, Tom Bombadil and the ring. He just pulls the ring out and he looks through it. And he just like, it's not a big deal. And he teases Bilbo about wearing it. Your hand's fair without it or something like that. And I think one of the letters said something along the lines of, if Tom Bombadil would have probably lost the ring because he just was so forgetful and he didn't really care about it, that it would just get dropped down the nearest hole and like rabbit hole or something.
Next month we can take some time and have a focus on Tom
new
Bombadil.
year.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Well,
Speaking of letters, I am presently reading another book of letters to my children.
Oh, very good.
A book of Christmas letters.
Letters
Yes.
of Father Christmas.
Yes.
Yes,
and
very good.
They are enjoying that.
Okay, good stuff.
That. And hero points instead of inspiration. But they did bring over shadow points, so that's good. And pretty much everything else. Most of the other stuff they brought over. And of course it's, a miniature-based combat because it's D&D.
Right.
Which is fine, but so
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah,
putting
we're
that
back.
up.
Sorry, we had a Comcast dropped our connection inexplicably again. They do it sometimes. It's a business account, but anyway.
Do you want me just to briefly restate what I said?
Very, very briefly.
So you
yeah.
don't have to
Go
try to
ahead.
bridge
Yes,
the whole
please.
thing. Okay, so what we lost actually there was just a review of the One Ring system, which initially came out in 2011, and Sophisticated Games had gotten the license for it, and then had commissioned Cubicle 7 to take that on, and so that's what they did 8 years ago. They have done a great job, and they were recently they're poised to come out with their second edition. When in November they surprisingly announced that they would be ceasing all work on that and ending their distribution of all One Ring and Adventures in Middle Earth role-playing products in the first half of 2020 because of an agreement that was not possible to be reached with Sophisticated Games. So it was a contractual issue, and Sophisticated Games basically came back and said, that's not the way we understood it. We're very saddened by the announcement that they are no longer supporting the second edition because we certainly are planning for the second edition to still come out. So we're just still left in limbo land, but we'll see how that all resolves. But it's related to Tolkien in the sense that those who do like role-playing and do love the setting of Middle Earth would be saddened to lose the most recent, and I would argue the best one so far, even though there's a lot of good things about MERP and a lot of good things about the Iron Crown, the Decipher ones, but really just how much the One Ring and AIM have brought that to the role-playing world. It's been a good system, so two systems anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so other stuff I just wanted to bring up from Ammonhen 280, the monthly publication of the Tolkien Society, and then I'd love for some comments from from people here. So there was a really interesting article about the inspiration for Tolkien's the young cook in Smith of Wootton Major. There's a young cook who's called Prentice. He bakes this cake, etc. He's taking the job from the old cook, who always bakes this cake, and there's a ring in it, and there's the whole fairyland story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently, Tolkien, this isn't Carpenter's biography, but Tolkien said, but Merton College comes in. Our present admirable little chef with a very tall hat is at least pictorially the original of Alf. So, anyway, referring to a character in Smith of Wootton Major. So it's a really interesting little article. Talks about how a young man who came from the north of England, in Cheshire, which I've lived in, and how he ended up getting to Oxford and being hired as a young cook at Oxford, which of course would be, that's very unheard of. And so it's a fun 2-page article to read. And he came in 1962. So Tolkien was writing about him in 1967. So, and of course, Smith of Wootton Major I think was written before that, but I think he hadn't really put it together and finished it until the 60s. And then something in their section called Behind Glass Doors.
Did you see my phone?
And this is interesting. It says that the membership for the Tolkien Society, of which we are an active SMILE, is 1,734. So that's good news.
Yep.
So a lot of people there. Google and word of mouth are still the largest source of members. And then a very, very wonderful article I recommend to all of you called Tolkien's Lost Chaucer by John M. Bowers. And I always was under the impression that Tolkien had a very low view of Chaucer.
From letters.
Right. But it's a little more nuanced than that. And this talks about, I'll just read the first paragraph. The theme of this book is, this is a review by Helen Armstrong of the book Tolkien's Lost Chaucer by John M. Bowers, which just came out this year.
Okay.
So there's your answer for books.
Mm-hmm.
The theme of this book is the unfinished project, Selections from Chaucer's Poetry and Prose, commissioned in 1922 by the Clarendon Press, Oxford, as a school-level primer. The Clarendon editor-in-charge was Kenneth Sysum, Tolkien's friend and former tutor, who knew his strength in early English. Tolkien was to be co-editor with Oxford academic George S. Gordon, not to be confused with his later collaborator E.V. Gordon, who actually initiated the project with the Clarendon Press. The two academics had separate tasks within the work. Tolkien was tasked with assessing the source texts drawn from W. Skeats's The Student's Chaucer, and making any necessary emendations. He made few, producing a glossary to the collection, straightforward, workmanlike, and impressive in its economy, after Sysom's insistence upon reducing its length, according to the author John M. Bowers. And here's the catch, to produce the notes for the texts, to the extent of 20 pages of the published work. At some point, Tolkien got stuck at 160 pages. He never resolved the situation, referring to it later as the Chaucerian incubus, meaning we and the author must assume an oppressive nightmare. 2 points about this book. It is about Tolkien, not about Chaucer, and it is about, among many other things, how the Chaucer project failed, even given a long time and no little effort by several people. It is not an edition of the work which Tolkien actually produced. And then it goes on from there for several pages. One really, I think the most fascinating thing in this article, or book review, is that basically the reason why Tolkien came to Oxford and was able to get a chair there was because of connections that the editor, or the guy who was in charge of Clarendon Press, Kenneth Sysom, his former tutor. This Clarendon editor in charge is the one who was responsible for getting him to Oxford, because being that it was produced or published in Oxford, the hope was if we could get him on site, it would be easier to complete the work.
The Chaucer work? You're talking about the Chaucer work?
Yes, about finishing the Chaucer work.
Oh, okay.
So, that's the reason why Tolkien actually came to Oxford in the first place. So here's a thought to think about, as she kind of concludes it, is, what if he had never worked on this Chaucer project? He may not have been brought to Oxford, and in that case, he would not have met C.S. Lewis. If he had not met C.S. Lewis, Lewis would not have been the necessary prompt to kind of get him to finish the Lord of the Rings. And without that, we wouldn't have the Lord of the Rings at all. So, indirectly, we can say thank you to Chaucer for the Lord of the Rings getting finished.
Well, maybe the reason why Tolkien couldn't finish it was because he didn't exactly. It's kind of like when an actor is in a movie and they don't like the character that they're playing and they do it anyways. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Isn't that kind of like,
It's kind of like,
Harrison Ford's attitude on Han Solo?
no. That's not where I'm going with this. I'm just saying that it's you know, I mean, if he's forced into a project that he really doesn't want to do, but he, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine that? It'd be like, you know.
Although he did accept the project, so one would assume that he didn't hate Chaucer. He just preferred early or Old English.
Maybe once he got started on the project, he realized how much he really did hate Chaucer.
Yeah, that was my
Kind of like what happened with George MacDonald.
Yeah, it's possible.
that he much preferred Old English and other older sources to Middle English.
Boy, you'd really not want Tolkien to read your works, because he'd be like, yeah, he
Because
says
he was
he likes
fickle.
it, but maybe afterwards he won't. Anyway,
that way.
that's a lot.
15 years later, he decides it's complete trash, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Thanks, McDonald.
So,
I always felt bad for C.S. Lewis because C.S. Lewis came straight out and said that MacDonald was his spiritual father or whatever, and Tolkien's attitude. I wonder how that kind of.
I don't think they always talked about McDonald's, so maybe it didn't come up. But so, did anybody have any more information on the friendship of Tolkien and W.H. Auden, or shall we move on to other things? Nothing.
I don't remember how I found out about Auden, but like, he has a couple of really good quotes that I feel that are very Tolkien-esque influenced.
Well, he did review, didn't he? I thought he reviewed The Lord of the Rings for a British newspaper, didn't he? Auden did. Maybe. So we'll have to follow up with Auden next month.
Yeah, if I remember, I'll have to look it up because I know.
Find some interesting quotes or references to Tolkien and Auden, and we'll bring that up next month. It'd probably be worthwhile just because he was part of a circle of authors. Okay, news and articles from the Emma Henry newsletter mentioned that. So we can follow up on Kalevala or letter 164. What would you like to do, Hawk?
Oh, we're going to call all. That's right.
Apparently we're going to cover all of it.
I'm trying to. Twitter's locked most of my accounts, so I'm trying to. Both of our Tolkien Society and Tolkien Mood accounts. And
It amazes me.
I knew it was coming, so I did all the things that I was supposed to prevent that from happening, and they still did it anyway. It's because of a lot of people out there abusing Twitter for politics and stuff. So.
By the way, since you have this out, some people who might be watching might be very curious what they are. Do you want to just briefly say what?
Yeah, that's Basic Fantasy Role-Playing Gaming, freely available at basicfantasy.org. You can download the PDFs for free, also the LibreOffice writer files if you want to edit your own version. It's all under the Open Gaming License 1.1. It's a mixture of old school D&D, like from basic D&D from the 70s and 80s,
Looks like that.
with some tweaks from 3rd, 4th, and 5th edition, but really, really rules light, so you can make character in 15 to 30 minutes. You have 4 races and 4 classes. They're not blended together. An elf is not a class. It's separate. But it's just very straightforward, and we've really liked it so much that we're making it one of our primary systems that we're training everybody and providing our community programs.
I mean, that just looks like the first edition.
It is, because it's all community. It's basically open source gaming.
Yeah. So people illustrate it.
Yeah, and then you can get the books super cheap. So if you have Amazon Prime, the rule book is only $6 printed.
As opposed to
$40 to $60 for a player's handbook from D&D.
Yeah, or even
Yeah, you can get $70, $80, $90, yeah. You can get the entire collection of like 3 rule books plus all the modules that are about $3 or $4, and each module is often many adventures. So the entire set's about a dozen books. 15 books. You have 3 copies of the rule book so that you have them for your friends. About $80 total if you have Prime, free shipping and such. They also have hardcovers and spiral bound through Lulu, but they're more in the $20 per book range for those bindings. Those prices offer softcover. But meanwhile, you can get the PDFs and the LibreOffice writer files and edit them the way you want and make your own version. We're working on making accessible versions for people with visual impairments, the blind, by putting in tags for screen readers. Oversized, we've made a special character sheet that's more accessible. It was around here a little bit ago. I think I buried it. But anyway, yeah, so we're very excited, and so we've been embraced. So we bought 3 entire sets because of our kits. When we run communities, we run tables, and we need an entire kit for each table. And so we bought 3 entire sets of it because for the price of just a few D&D books, we were able to buy 3 entire sets, right? So this is so much more available to everybody. And it also is good for teaching because characters die really easily. The newer systems tend to nerf consequences to actions. It's really hard to kill off a character. So often when they do die, they don't see the chain of events of bad choices they made, and they either, if they already have learned helplessness and victim mentality, they just blame it on bad luck or the game rather than choices they made along the way. The thing about old school games like this, where when you hit 0 hit points, your character's dead, it's usually causality is pretty clear. You made a few bad choices that led to either you or your entire party being wiped out. It's usually pretty easy to do a post-mortem analysis and go, yeah, next time let's not do that.
And
so
to generate a new character.
And then make a new character
It's
takes
fast.
15 to 30 minutes. So you can learn much more quickly what works and what doesn't work, and it makes you a better player than most of the systems the last 20 years.
Do you take soil
And
samples?
our research support proves this. What's that?
Do you take soil samples on the postmortem analysis?
Yeah, so anyway, that's why it's out there, because I was taking
He
some
ships it to
photos.
the Los Angeles
I recently wrote an article all about improving accessibility. We're also writing, based on the neuroscience of learning, one of the biggest problems with role-playing games, all of them, including this one, is they don't have good introductory... Even the starter sets aren't any good. They keep relying on 2 things. Either mass learning, where you have to read everything yourself and then try to figure it out, or the mentor model. And there's nothing wrong with either, except that they don't scale, and they generally don't fit the average general population. And the mentorship's model is wonderful for learning more advanced things and tricks of the trade, but you can only have so many mentors. It doesn't scale. The mass learning thing is a huge time-consuming trial and error where you make a ton of mistakes along the way, trying to understand how things work. And eventually you get there, but it takes years. That also doesn't scale, and generally is not accessible to more average IQ or lower folks. So there's been this, I've been complaining for decades that there's this huge barrier to entry to role-playing games, that gamers keep making the same mistake over and over. And I just had a Facebook discussion because of this article the last 3 days. People saying, well, it's always worked. The tried and true way has always worked. And I explained, well, just because it's always worked doesn't mean it's the best way. And they're like, we have to dumb down the system. Like, nope, that's another myth. That's the problem. The last 20 years, they've been dumbing down the game, trying to make it more accessible. That reduces the benefits of role-playing games.
Correct.
It's like dumbing down literature, right? You dumb it down, you don't learn as much. You don't raise people up. You don't have to do that if you understand the neuroscience of learning. You can learn the most complex systems and concepts and vocabulary if it's done in layers, with narrative, self-referencing, memory cues. I've got a whole list in the article on rpgresearch.com explaining how you can learn the most complicated things. And if more schools would adapt what is proven to be the most effective way of learning, we would see a big turnaround in our education system that has just completely imploded. So it is, and
you don't make Beowulf more accessible
by dumbing it down.
You
Teach them in layers. You teach them a little bit at a time, help them relate to it, and then slowly layer in complexity. So same as role-playing. So now in 1983, Frank Mentzer made a version of D&D called Basic D&D in the Beckme book, Basic Expert Companion Masters of Mortals, that did it right, just intuitively. It started you out with a little solo adventure, because that's the other thing. You always had to have others, like if you open your present up for Christmas, right? Christmas is about to happen. And you got your basic D&D starter kit, which there's a gazillion of them. We tried every single one of them out. They all fail as starter kits. The assumption is you're by yourself. They always assume you've got somebody either to mentor you or your friends, and you're going to figure it out all together. It's going to take you days of trial and error just to get it working. Because you can't just open it and start playing. Like every other game just about out there. Maybe 30 minutes of reading. No, you have to read for hours and hours to really be ready to do it. And it says, read all the way through this before you try to run this. As a player, you don't need to, but as the person running it. Beckme says, well, let's play you through your first adventure and we'll teach you a few basic concepts. All right, you did that. Now let's make a character and let's do your second adventure, and you're going to learn some more complex. And by the time you're done, you're going to have the basics of playing. You won't know everything, but you'll know enough. And then the third adventure is now you need to get one or more friends together. You only need one friend. Make sure they've read these first two adventures first. And now you're going to GM, and we're going to hold your hand as you go through a very railroaded dungeon crawl. But we're going to walk you through exactly what to say, when to say it, how to handle it, how to resolve all the things. And you will now have the basics of GMing done. Then after that, you can go on to more advanced rules and learning. But that is the way people learn.
Almost.
Through exploration and incremental, right? Yeah. The problem is 99.9% of the role-playing games out there don't do it that way. All the starter sets don't. That's all front-end mass load learning, and it is proven that's ineffective for learning. Even if you have a higher IQ and can muddle through, it's less effective than if you had done it the other way, and you would benefit even more from your higher IQ. So I've just been railing about that for 20 years, and instead they've been dumbing down the books, just like they've been dumbing down the school system. It's exactly backwards of what we should be doing. And we now have hard science to prove what works, and then you just adapt for people's special needs. You make little tweaks for that. But you need less adaptation for learning if you follow the neuroscience principles for learning. And the schools don't do it.
And I just read an article from MIT Technology Review this past week that seemed to indicate that that data is out there, and people like you and I have known this all along. It isn't giving school kids devices for cognitive learning is not working.
No, you're taking away their ability to learn.
So
effectively.
one of the things was you get stuck here, and you forget to raise your hand. Mm-hmm. And when you raise your hand and you have a problem, the teacher then teaches you, and not just you, but the rest of the class.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the mentorship model there.
And that is one of the issues of that they are discovering with device-based learning, has been lack of
Well, you lose the mentor.
mentorship.
Right. And
Yes.
so the mentor, so introductory stuff you can automate. Once you try to get more complicated, that's where you need to bring in more of the teacher-mentor model. But even that should be done in layers.
So we have created a whole school system full of technicians
Yes.
and not
Who
mentors.
are crap, who don't understand any of the tech anyway.
So how do we move the needle back to mentorship?
Well, no. It needs to be a mixture, but not the way it's currently being done.
Yeah.
So if I could bring it back
Yes.
to Kalevala,
Yes.
is that where you want to
Right
go?
here, yeah.
So
Did you want to just start it from the beginning?
I think we could. There's a couple thoughts.
Okay.
One is there is actually a story in it, I believe, called the Kalevala, which is a poem. And there's also
Yeah, we did the Unfortunate Kalervo many years ago,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that was when Turin, the children of Hurin came out. We kind of were paralleling Turin stuff.
Sure.
There's the Men of Kalevala go on a Sampo raid.
There's the Cattle Song, the Broken Knife. I don't know if that's in yours.
The problem is much of it's in Finnish.
Okay. We've got some.
But I thought we'd just kind of go through it. I'll skip. I mean, if you want, I can
it's a
cover the.
sense of it. I think if we can get the sense of it by a few maybe samples. There's.
Okay. I mean, there's a short prologue. It's not very long, but it
Yeah,
gives
sure.
some historical context.
Why don't you
for
do that?
everybody.
Maybe we can do that this time, and
Okay.
then if we need to continue on next time.
Okay. So here's the prologue, and again, this is a certain edition. There's many different editions. This is the Kalevala Tales of Magic and Adventure by, and it's meant more for kids, but that makes it accessible in some ways. Written in Helsinki on Alexis Kivi and Finnish Literature Day by Kirsti Makkanen, Pirkko-Liisa Suurhagen, and translated by Kaarina Brooks. And I'm sorry if I'm slaughtering the Finnish. I did study Suomi many years ago, but I'm sorry if I'm slaughtering it. Elias Lönnrot's Kalevala first appeared in 1835. The print run was small, only 500 copies. But its reception was exciting. This so-called Old Kalevala was shorter than the work we know today. For example, the runes dealing with Kalervo's fate were not included until 1849, when the more extensive work was published. Later in 1862, Lönnrot designed a short Kalevala for use in schools. The 1849 version, however, is the best known around the world, and the one in which this edition's retellings are based. On the one hand, the Kalevala is a folk epic, but on the other, it is a creation of Elias Lönnrot. Starting in the 1820s, Lönnrot collected thousands of folk poems, including many variations of each from eastern Finland, Russian Karelia, as well as Ingria. Lönnrot combined and edited the different versions of these individual poems and even created new characters and events. So doesn't that sound like Tolkien?
Yeah.
Right?
And his name was Lönnrot?
Yeah, Elias, E-L-I-A-S, or Elias, but Elias.
Yep.
Lönnrot, L-O with the double dots, N-N-O-R, excuse me, N-N-R-O-T.
Can
Elias
can I
Lönnrot.
ask a question? I'm confused. Is the Kalevala something that already existed, or is it something that this guy compiled
He
together?
compiled all the stories together into what would become the Kalevala. The Kalevala is one of the stories included in this bundle of stories that he compiled together from the Finnish and
I'm
Russian.
just trying to understand who created it.
Right. Well, that's what it said. That Lönnrot combined and edited the different versions of these individual poems, and they were song poems, and even created new characters and events. So it's a mixture. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
I mean, you could totally see Tolkien doing
It's
this.
a lot like
his
the
actual-
but more original, where he's adding some of his own stuff.
Yep.
So his actual name was Alias?
Elias, not alias. Thus was born a cohesive epic whose effect on Finnish culture is beyond measure. The Kalevala has been translated into more than 50 languages and is perhaps the only Finnish work that has left a permanent mark on the global literary scene. It is one of the most famous epics in the world, and it is the national epic of Finland. And Tolkien wanted a national epic for England, and his crest had long since fallen. The arts world in Finland, as well as abroad, has been interested in the Kalevala, and the tales have captivated the imaginations of visual artists, composers, and authors. Well known, for example, are the Kalevala-themed paintings of artist Akseli Gallen-Kallela and the compositions of Jean Sibelius. Peter and the Wolf, I think.
And Finlandia.
Oh, right. Both theater and screen have also interpreted in different ways the imaginary world of the Kalevala. The Kalevala runes have also been a treasure trove for folklore researchers. Today, the Kalevala remains an integral part of Finnish culture. Many Finnish proper names and place names, as well as expressions and idioms in the language, originate from the Kalevala. The folk poetry meter of the Kalevala meter, is over 1,000 years old.
Wow.
The folk each line has 8 beats and 4 truches.
Truques.
Croquets, yes.
Trochees. I've forgotten what. Remind me what that means.
So
It's been too long.
French.
It's the opposite
I get
of,
that.
It's the opposite of iambic. So iambic is ba-rum, ba-rum, ba-rum. A trochee is da-da, da-da, da-da.
Okay. So 8 beats and 4 trochees. Boy, it's been a long time since I studied poetic meter.
I think maybe I'm... Yeah.
Yeah.
Been a long time,
Among the
yeah.
poetic devices are alliteration, colorful figures of speech, anthropomorphism, and narration with repetition. Some of that repetition was annoying.
What kind of colorful speech are we talking about here?
We'll
Not
find
like,
out.
not like
We'll
smashing
find
your
out.
finger kind of
Many
thing.
different editions of the Kalevala have been published in Finland. Some books are for school use, others for deluxe editions illustrated by artists. The tales in the Kalevala have also been told in prose. Maame Kirja by Z. Topelius is an example of this. This present edition, the Kalevala Tales of Magic and Adventure, Suomen lasten Kalevala by Kirsti Makinen, tells the events in prose, but also gives examples of the rich poetic language of the epic. The enchanting illustrations by Pirkko-Liisa Surojagen beautifully capture the images created by the text. So here is Rune 1, lines 1 to 14.
What does the use of the word rune mean in this instance?
That's a good question.
I,
To me, a rune is
Doesn't-
a single symbol.
I wonder if they're using it as almost like...
as the poem.
as a division.
Yeah.
Like a canto.
Chapter?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I have some studying
Maybe
to
there
do.
were originally runes that went along with his first edition of it.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up again. I knew I could have answered this 15 years ago, but it's all fallen out of my head. So I have no idea about the timing on this. I'm going to have to look it up, but so I'll just do the best I can. But now I have the inclination and the pleasurable notion to begin my tuneful rhyming and to start my harmonizing, spooling out my people's legends, chanting runes of my forefathers. In my mouth the words are melting, ancient speeches overflowing. On my tongue the words appearing, on my teeth the sounds are crumbling. Hearty chum, my carefree brother, my beloved childhood fellow, come and echo my reciting, chant in rhythm with my singing. So chapter 1 is the creation of the world. Thus was born Vainamoinen, the great singer.
Yep.
Alone as night, alone as day, Vainamoinen,
Vainamoinen, I think.
Vainamoinen, there we go. Appeared, I'm being very literal on the vowel pronunciation,
yeah.
I know it's
This is the Bombadil character.
Vainamoinen appeared upon the earth, already a hero from ages past. He was born of Ilmatar, the lovely goddess nature. Ilmatar is the name of our software project, by the way.
Nice. Now I see it. I see what you did there. but just so you keep an ear out for how this character, this wizard, is possibly similar to Tom Bombadil.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the singer that started the whole thing here.
Sort
No,
of.
well, this is start of the creator. Yeah, I mean, yeah, of the world. Yes.
Not the, yeah.
Yeah. Because remember, these songs were passed down by song. These were the Finnish
Right.
Edda of song. In days long ago, at the beginning of time, there was only water and air. The world had yet to take form. No land, plants, or people existed. Only Ilmatar, ethereal virgin, lived alone on the vast acres of air. Void were the hinterlands of heaven, and she grew weary of her tedious, lonely life. So Ilmatar, airy maiden, descended onto the primeval ocean, and let the breezes rock her and the currents carry her on the foam-flecked billows. Sea wind impregnated her, and for 7 centuries, 9 lifetimes, she endured her swollen womb. She swam east and westward, south and northward, and still the unborn remained in the water mother's belly. In agony she lamented her fate. "Oh, woe is me," she moaned. "I am forever doomed to toss upon the waters. It would have been better for me to live as an airy maid than as a shivering sea wife among the waves. O Ukko, supreme god, please release a damsel from her terrible distress." Scaup, the sleek duck, was flying hither and thither, searching for a nesting site. It saw the knee of Ilmatar, and upon it built its nest. Forthwith it laid 7 eggs, 6 of gold and 1 of iron, and began to brood.
Like it.
That's
It's got a duck.
does that count as a parasite?
And
No, there's
here's
only one, not a pair.
that's Ilmatar.
Yep.
And the rune for that is from Rune 1, lines 111 to 116. Long ago the nature's daughter, Luon Natar the airy virgin, kept her chastity for ages, nursed her purity for eons, on the vast and endless acres, on the level plains of heaven.
The wind impregnated her. I don't know. That,
Home. Wind let's not be literal here. This is all poetic.
Talk about,
Don't be literal.
Different kind of
Don't be
dress.
literal. Such searing pain.
Too many questions.
Ilmatar felt her knee burning and her skin scorching. She shifted her knee, and lo, the eggs rolled into the water.
Oh, no.
With a crunch they cracked open, and the pieces hurtled up into the heavens. Thus were created earth, sky, sun, moon, stars, and even clouds. Time journeyed on.
Iron. Which one's iron?
The water mother floated for years upon the misty billows of the ocean. Came the 10th summer, Ilmatar raised her head and began the task of creation. With her hands she shaped peninsulas and coves. Shifting onto her side, she created smooth shores and sandy beaches. Stomping her feet, she formed fishing grounds teeming with salmon for fishermen. But she also raised rocky shoals to send unwary sailors to a watery grave. You want me to continue, pass this around?
Okay.
30 years passed, and Wainamoinen was still imprisoned in his mother's womb, living in his dark hiding place. He began to recite runes inside his cramped quarters. Moon, sun, kind great bear, free a man from his bewildering predicament. Guide a human child out to behold the moon and gaze upon the stars. When nothing happened, Wainamoinen at last grew impatient. With his 4th finger, he moved the gate of his prison. With his left toe, he slid the bony bolt, and on his hands and knees he crawled out over the threshold. From there, he plunged headlong into the ocean and floated among the waves for 5-6 years until he drifted onto a nameless headland. Thus, at last, was born Wainamoinen, man of great power, sage from time immemorial. Sea Wind was his father, Ilmatar. So, yes, Sea Wind was his father. You were being literal. Ilmatar, his mother. He was already an enchanter and a rune singer the day he was born. Wainamoinen rose from the ocean on a treeless island. He dwelt there for years, but to his dismay he found the land barren. There were no trees, bushes, or grasses. Whom could he get to till these lands? Sampsa Pellervoinen, a fellow of somewhat stunted growth, came to be his helper. From where? And soon, and soon, things began to happen.
You know, this thing is a lot busier than we thought.
An awesome man he was, this Sampsa, son of the fields. He sowed the clearings, hills and fields, with spruce, pine, birch, aspen, bird cherry, rowan, willow, juniper, and oak. Where does that sound like in the world?
Finland?
Maybe.
Well, it also makes me think like this is their version of Johnny Appleseed. He throws the seeds out and
Sure.
Sure. The saplings
Cuffs them up.
grew and flourished. The top of one giant oak even reached the skies, and its branches prevented the clouds from passing by. But when the oak began to cover the sun, Wainamoinen started to look for someone to chop down this giant tree. But where could he find such a man?
You mean he doesn't want to do it himself?
Paul Bunyan.
Paul Bunyan, yes.
Blue ox.
At last from the sea there rose a tiny fellow, the size of a man's thumb.
Darn it! I said Paul Bunyan.
You went the
It's Ant-Man.
On his head,
Or maybe it's Termite Man.
yeah, maybe. On his head was a hat made of copper. On his feet were copper boots. On his hands he wore gloves of copper. Suddenly the man began to grow, and as soon as his head was reaching for the clouds, and the distance between his eyes was almost 2 meters. It does sound like Paul Bunyan. When this giant struck his axe into the oak, fire sparked from the blade, and the tree crashed heavily across the arc of heaven. It was said that whoever broke a branch from this oak would receive the gift of eternal happiness. Now, at last, the tree's berries and flowers began to flourish. Grass sprung upon the earth, trees burst into leaf, and birds came to sing on the tree branches. With his sharp axe, Wainamoinen felled a whole forest, making a wide clearing for cultivation. He left only one birch standing. "Why do you not also cut down the birch?" Eagle wondered. "There you can rest for your travels, and the cuckoo can delight us with your call." So here is Rune 2, lines 309 through 316. Stooping now, he sowed the clearing, scattered seeds upon the burnt land, and he spoke the words that follow. "Seeds are flowing through my fingers, and through the Creator's fingers, from the hand of the Almighty, down upon these fertile acres, on these meadows cleared for growing. Wake up, earth, from thy deep slumber, from thy sleep, thou Lord's own meadow. Let the seeds grow in the clearing, and the stalks rise tall and slender. Let the yield be in the thousands, reproduce by many hundreds, from my plowing and my sowing, as a reward for all my labor. There you can rest from your travels, and the cuckoo can delight us with its call," replied Wainamoinen. "You did well," Eagle cried gratefully. And then the mighty bird of air rewarded its benefactor. It struck a spark and lit a great flame. North wind fanned the fire and burned the fallen trees to ashes. Now, Wainamoinen had a fertile field for cultivation. Upon it he had sowed barley seed and recited magic spells to bring forth a good harvest. He asked Ukko, supreme god, great creator, ruler of the clouds, to drizzle warm rain upon the sprouts, and he called upon the old woman of Manu with these words: "O Earth Mother, make the soil fertile and make the sod push forth fruit. The earth does not lack vigor as long as the daughters of nature favor it with their blessings." And when the clouds sprinkled rain like nectar on the fields, The grain grew with frenzied haste. Each stalk of barley was triple knotted. Thus ends chapter 1.
Okay.
Was it triple knotted or triple knotted?
That'd be a good place to stop. Thank you. What do you guys think of that?
Thank you.
So was the ashes of the trees used to for fertilizer? Was that what it was implying? Am I wrong?
I'm guessing so. Yes, ash is a common fertilizer.
Well, you would think fire, especially in a place that's cold, place that's farther north, would have a specific significance because of the fact that you have to depend on it so much. You know.
It of course it depends on the pH of the soil. I'm finding that the soil where we are doesn't need more lime, which is one of the or ash is a principal component of.
It doesn't need more ash.
Yeah.
Being in the shadow of Mount St. Helen.
It needs right, exactly, and Crater Lake. Mount Mazama. It needs pine needles and coffee grounds. It needs acidic, but there are certain lands, more rocky soils, I would gather, that need ash for crops to grow.
Well, they've done research looking at where the fires burn during the summer, and then look where the new leaf growth is during the following spring, and it's always very intense where the fires were.
Well,
No,
unless
it's
there's
in the
something more on
field,
that we
not
want to talk
intense.
about, we could read a little of letter one. Actually, letter 164 is pretty short,
Okay.
and we could. And we're at 2:45. We could just that could be our last.
That
piece.
works.
Okay. Richard, did you want to read next? Let me get it to you here a second.
He's giving me very fine print.
Only the best for you.
It is fine. That
I've got it. Okay.
Yeah. I have had a very grueling... Oh, sorry. 164, from a letter to Naomi Mitchison, 29th of June, 1955.
I've had a very grueling time with far more work than I could really cope with, plus Volume 3. I'm feeling as flat as a burst tire, but I may revive when, or if, as promised, the final proofs of Volume 3 arrive tomorrow. The booksellers, among them Mr. Wilson of Bumpus, say that having delayed so long, late in September is now the proper time for publication. I think A and U may now take the earlier history in some form. When I was in town last Friday, they seemed willing to envisage a book about as long as Volume 1.
A and U would be Allen and Unwin.
Yes. And if you look at the book
The earlier history means the Silmarillion, right?
Presumably.
Yes. I thought 3 was the most number of pages.
For what?
Volume 3?
Volume 3 versus volume
1 and
1
2.
and 2. 2 was short.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to tell from the
Yeah.
editions I have. 'Cause,
Right.
I mean, yeah, if you do the last one, because it's so you got those last 3 books there on the Tolkien Memorial.
Yep.
The last one's all appendices, and then you got the 2 chapters, 2 major chapters.
That is why it is
Yeah,
so long.
that would make
Okay.
it, yeah, because that was his concession to not doing the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
But he didn't. I mean, that's the interesting thing is that Allen and Unwin never published
Right.
the Silmarillion.
No, it's the same. That was Tolkien's concession, since they refused to do the Silmarillion, and he went to the other publisher, and they wouldn't do it either. He came back, and the concession he made was, well, at least let me make these appendices to explain the key parts.
In some form.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the book as long as Volume 1. You're
Right.
probably just saying that to make him happy, but or maybe you're being wishful,
Yeah.
optimistic.
Yeah.
Okay, so that earlier history is what ends up going into the appendices. which for many years was all that people had.
Mm-hmm.
Really to go along, try to know about the earlier stuff. I mean, until 1977, right? You didn't have, or 1978.
Yeah, we didn't have any until the
Silmarillion.
Silmarillion, yeah.
So for a good almost 20 years, a lot of Tolkien, people who enjoyed reading that had to kind of work in with that.
Yep.
I've been to the Wade Center in Chicago. Wheaton College has some of the a lot of books that the Inklings have written and various works that others have written. Especially in the early days, those first 20 years in the 60s and 70s, or like Parma. What's the one you have, Hawk, on Elvish? Parma.
Parma Andorian?
Andorian.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
that's Michael Martinez.
It was a very, I mean, 60s and 70s were kind of like the early days of working, and then you have in the 80s you start having a lot more is now known, and so that they're able to build on that, and then you have Christopher Tolkien with the History of Middle Earth,
Unfinished Tales.
Yep.
Then we start getting the Book of Lost Tales and the whole History of Middle Earth arc from there.
Yeah, and then History of Middle Earth.
Right. Well, yeah.
So now we have so much there. I like his feeling. What he says, "I am feeling as flat as a burst tire."
And he spelled it like tire of Greek myth.
Yeah, that's how they spell car tires.
Yes.
In England. As a teacher, I can just really relate to this. Grading is my least favorite, activity, and I love teaching. I love being with students, but today is my first day of Christmas vacation, so huzzah!
So you're gonna give me a big
Huzzah!
Andy Dave. No, A.
Oh, okay.
95%.
I survived without making too much Skywalker references.
No, that's because you love it so much. That's why you're critical.
Yeah.
Well, am I wrong?
Well, yeah, I love it.
Original.
We're getting off track, but anyways, yeah.
I can derail this even more.
Don't need any rails. Okay, so no other comments on. So basically, just his time.
Favorite game.
I mean, really, you wonder for Tolkien if he had more time, how much he really would have actually accomplished. But I think, knowing myself anyway, not that we're the same, but I feel like even when I have a lot of time, I'm not necessarily automatically more productive.
Correct.
Yeah, it takes effort.
It does. Go
Or
ahead.
boredom.
I was gonna say that the Leonardo da Vinci was known for starting all these different projects and never finishing, and I think we got the Mona Lisa out of it, right?
Yep.
And in some ways, I kind of feel like it's the same with Tolkien. Like, he did a whole bunch of stuff, but we ended up really with a life's work that took him how many years of his life to really, I mean, he started it when he was young, after he got out of the military, or even before that. Well, didn't he? I don't remember when he started it, but it was, at least 40 years of his life.
Oh, yeah.
Mona Lisa?
I'm talking about Tolkien.
Oh.
Tolkien's Lord of the Rings.
That was the last thing I heard about.
Took him how many years for the Silmarillion and
Yeah.
and
1917 really is where we.
right, and it came out in like the 60s.
He didn't just
right?
talk about niggling. He practiced
So
niggling.
1950. So yeah, 40 would be an accurate.
Well, in some ways, I feel like maybe
Professor in Nicholas.
like some of these obscure things that he was interested in, like
Yeah.
were are more or less forgotten, but
Yeah.
his big epic is not as is like his one life thing. I feel like C.S. Lewis, he created like a huge series. Like, he had a number of different books, and Tolkien was never happy because C.S. Lewis created those books really fast and didn't have the, I don't know what I want to call it,
Consistency.
the consistency or the mythological coherence that
Yep.
that C.S. Lewis But C.S. Lewis produced like 3 different series. He produced, he produced his science fiction series. He produced, the Lord of the Rings. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And and what I'm saying is that Tolkien, if he could have just let go of the niggling, I wonder how much creative work he would have gotten done. Like what we
let go of the niggling, though, it wouldn't have been as deep as it is.
That's true.
Perennial
That's true.
struggle. I don't know what the answer is to that.
It just
Immortality.
no.
Tolkien would just have kept cranking out more, niggling forever, but there would have been more and more and more.
Yeah, well, there's the depth of it
And
is.
Christopher would have even more obtuse notes to go through.
Well, he did get to a point about it where he said, "I don't think there's anything more I can say about hobbits." So he knew even at a certain point that like this thing had gotten out of his control. He even talks about, like it was too big, and if anything, it was meant for adults, and not children. And
Well, The Hobbit was meant for children, wasn't it?
Yeah, sort of. But I don't know. As a dad, when I told stories to my kids, it was always a little bit for me too. It's a shared experience. So.
Yep.
All right, let's go around. Final comments, and then I think we'll be done. It's 2:55, so we can wrap it up. I have nothing else to really share. And anybody else?
I'm trying to unlock the majority of my Twitter accounts that have been suspended.
Yep.
So both of our Tolkien Moot and our Tolkien Scholars Twitter accounts are currently suspended. You can't access them at all. They've deleted all followers and everything. I'm putting in appeals, see if they'll unsuspend them, because that was a key part of how, because I'd already dropped Facebook. And, because when we got up around 5,000 friends, they locked it.
Oh, I did get
It's ridiculous. These are the things that you use to communicate, and you build a community, and then they kill you for it.
I did get an automated calendar warning about the stream, the Tolkien Society meeting, but I'm not really...
Yeah, but that's from Google. That's not
Okay.
from Twitter.
Well, I was
Yeah.
just trying to point out that some things were still operating.
Yeah, but that's only if your email address was put into that calendar, as opposed to people being able to just follow.
Well,
for
I never
updates.
intentionally did it. It just sort of happened.
I added you manually. I put in the calendar each of you who are regulars here to get that update. That's a manual process.
Okay,
I
so
opted
Twitter
you
has
in.
suspended the accounts. I put that in
Tolkien
the
Moot
notes.
and Tolkien Scholars and Other Minds magazine. Other Minds magazine as well.
Sorry about that, Howard.
Yeah, and many others.
So then, if there's no other comments, I think next month we should read letter 165, which is kind of a longish one. It's to Houghton Mifflin, which will be interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
We should probably follow up on Auden. I think it'd be great if we could follow up on the next part of the Kalevala with Vainamoinen, and some already clear, similarities to perhaps to Tom Bombadil.
Yeah.
We're not sure. I mean,
Copper instead of
it's yellow,
yellow,
hat,
yeah.
or yellow boots.
the copper seems a little awkward.
Yeah,
Depends on your point
it
of view.
chafes. Our next Smile meets on Saturday, January 18, 2020.
Oh, actually, okay.
Or not?
Glad you said that. Well, you guys are going to need to run it because I am running a professional RPG workshop down at the office that day, all day, 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. for paying customers.
Okay.
It's about a $300 workshop, and it's for professionals who want to integrate role-playing gaming into their schools or their therapeutic settings. And people have been asking for it for a long time, and we're finally doing that. So that's Saturday, unfortunately.
What about the Saturday before that?
I think that's possible.
Because otherwise, I don't think we're
I
going to be
hate to
able to
break
stream
up the
it.
rhythm.
I know that. But
Well, I mean, I can leave this. I can have this all set up for you, or if you wanted, just a few clicks to go, or have somebody here to
Cooperstown,
help
was
you.
it easy or hard to do that last time?
I didn't set it. I didn't start it, but I can imagine it's not
I thought you...
rocket science.
Because all you have to do, if it's all set up,
Right.
is
To
Hit the big red button.
Yeah, is all you have to do is hit start streaming, start
You'd have it all
recording,
right.
and then switch the scene, and then
Right.
you're
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
No, you're done. You stop, and then end stream.
Yep.
I would just have all that ready for you.
Yep.
Well, what do you all think? You want to just do that? Stick with the 18th?
I think it's better to keep our schedule.
How many of you can be here?
consistent.
Chris,
Oh,
can you be here?
quick point of order though. Go ahead and ask that
Yeah,
first, and then
I can be here. Yeah.
Okay.
You think so? Okay.
I know nothing, but my brother is visiting in January.
Okay. Do you know if it's during that time?
I have no idea.
Okay. Hawk, what was your order?
Tolkien Moot.
Yes.
Because I've got RPG conference probably the second weekend of July, and then we have to drive 5 days before Gen Con out to Indianapolis. I'll be gone for 15 days from about July 23rd until August 9th. So Tolkien Moot is a problem for July. But we don't want to push it all the way off to October, so I was thinking we might do it the third Saturday of August. That'll give us just enough time to recuperate from Gen Con and have it ready.
Shall we do a vote?
Yeah.
All in favor? Say aye.
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 All
Opposed?
opposed? Say nay. Abstentions?
Did you need a
Abstain.
reiteration from being distracted?
No.
Okay. Other suggestions?
No, I think I'm abstaining from this one.
Okay, so did you vote?
Abstain.
Yes. No.
You can't abstain?
You already raised your hand for aye. So 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes.
No, I was abstaining.
How come you're abstaining?
Oh.
Just no opinion when.
No.
Oh,
I do not know what summer brings.
Okay. It would be August 22nd.
Right.
Or no, 15th. Sorry, August 15th.
And that can
What
be
did I
hunting
just
season, which
vote
can
for? I
be
think I
early
misunderstood.
hunting
I appreciate
season,
that you
which
voted
can
for it.
be-
It's fine. It's
That
just
early,
basically
huh?
saying we wanted to
Yeah, there's a
move from July to August
dual
Tolkien
elk
so
season
Okay.
in
it just helps
Northeast
to
Oregon.
make the decision.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Hawk could just say we're doing it, but he wants our feedback, so that's all. And there you have it.
August 15th?
Yes.
All right, we'll lock it in. It will be a very hectic July and August, but we'll make it work. All right, and we're sorry about Twitter. I don't know if they'll unlock it. I'll do everything I can. This is really rough because this is how I run an awful lot of community sites. They want to be able to track everything I do under one account. That doesn't work when you're trying to keep all of your communities separate, because I have a sign language group, I have a 2600 group.
That's correct.
I have a Tolkien group, one Tolkien group, and then we have a Tolkien convention group, which is different. And then, research group, and then therapeutic group. These are separate groups and separate communities.
Yep.
It doesn't make any sense to mingle them all in one account. But I keep getting punished, first by Facebook, now Twitter. Twitter's just doing it because of all the political backlash, the attacks from Europe and the attacks from California, legal attacks. So I understand why. I just hope I can undo it. It's because there's a bunch of bad actors out there who've made like millions of bad accounts, and we're getting caught in the backlash of that. Yeah. So I'm sorry people aren't getting updates right now, because that was our main method for announcing was Twitter. Since most people don't use RSS feeds anymore, that used to be the main way. So I guess subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars until they suspend that.
Optimist, are
If
we?
you subscribe there, then at least you'll get our videos when they get announced and released and such. But that's it for this December 21st. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Wherever you may
Bye-bye.
be well, and Namarie.
Marie. Oh, this is off.
Oh, battery died.
That was
Well, I hope.
I just turned
Looks
it off.
like two.
Oh, you just turned it off now.
Oh, yeah.
Two is off?
There we go. I guess we did have it. Good.